But fundamentally, when you ride this bike, you don't notice most of these things because it just does its job honestly and well. Where would you like to start? Engine, packaging, handling, daily life? Where would you like to start? Because there's a lot to talk about
Because
here.
this is a really unique motorcycle.
Yeah.
I think the packaging is a very integral to what they have created as a motorcycle.
Sure.
So I think let's start there.
Okay, so the first thing you should know is that this is a really heavy motorcycle. Okay, it's nearly 150 kilos.
Wow. Okay.
And the payload is also 150 kilos. So if you're thinking that I can put 5 people, 4 people on a bike, which Rajiv Bajaj, I don't think should have suggested. I think it's a terrible idea to do it. And I'm saying this because if you consider yourself a market leader, then you should also consider that you have a role in curating people's expectations. And if you set the expectation that 3 and 4 up riding is okay, then you're making a mistake. It's not good. And in any case, the payload of this vehicle is 150 kilos, which means you'll get 2 adults and a bit, and that's it. So if you're going to argue that a husband, wife and child can sit in the middle, fair enough. But when you allude to the idea that even more can be done, I think that's wrong. Okay? But the first challenge comes from the CNG equipment. Remember, about 19 kilos of this weight is just CNG stuff.
Sorry, before we move forward, 150 is not that much. It's 2 adults.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
It's
That's
like
exactly
you and me
my
on the
point.
bike. That's it, done.
That's exactly my point, right? And just to put a fine point on it, we are both about 80 kilos in gear. So if 2 of us were to sit on the motorcycle in gear, we are already at the payload capacity of this motorcycle. Nothing more. It will be a very spacious way to sit.
Yeah.
And even if we were both 6'4", then also there'd be a lot of space on this bike. But it doesn't fundamentally and certifiably have the payload to carry more than this. So please do not delude yourself into thinking I will ride 3 up. First, it's wrong. Second, the numbers say the bike can't do it. One. Second, the CNG tank is a 2 kilo tank, which doesn't sound like a lot because 2 kilos of petrol is not much. But a 2 kilo CNG tank is this big.
Right.
So most of the middle of the motorcycle that is hidden behind the bodywork is actually the white CNG tank. And you could easily say that the bike is built around the tank because it was the largest volume that they had to resolve. Right? I asked them whether they considered the Tata idea of taking 2 smaller tanks so that the packaging would be a little bit more flexible. They said, see, it's not like 2 tanks would be 15 kilos. 2 tanks would have raised the weight penalty even further. Today, 15 kilos is the tank, 4 kilos is the additional equipment because apart from the tank, you've got a full independent CNG system with its own injectors, its own maps, its own patterns. Right? The engine is the same. And again, CNG is a drier fuel and it runs hotter. So the engine is calculated for that purpose, which doesn't affect petrol operation. So what Bajaj is saying effectively is that if they were to remove CNG from this bike, they get a fully functional emission compliant petrol vehicle. The rules are if your 2-wheeler doesn't have more than 2 liters of petrol in them, a 3-wheeler with 3 liters and a 4-wheeler with 5 liters, they are called limp home petrol mode, which is your backup for the idea that if I run out of CNG, I can switch to petrol. If you do that, you don't have to meet emission norms. Anyway, the emission norms for CNG are slightly less critical than petrol. But if you have limp home measurements, then you don't even have to meet those norms. But despite which, this 125cc engine is BS6 compliant in CNG mode and in petrol. So it's a fully fledged 2-motorcycle system.
Correct.
Right? And what they've said is using that switch on the fly, whenever you feel like you can switch between the 2 modes and the bike will start up on CNG or on petrol and any combination thereof. It's not a fully smooth switchover, which we will discuss in detail. Let's go back to packaging. So first you have this big giant 2-liter CNG tank, and what Bajaj did is the only thing that was actually possible to do, honestly. It's not clever, it's obvious. They had to build a trellis. You can't build a frame which has a spine, for example. A twin spar kind of configuration would just make it too expensive. So what you're left with is trellis, and Bajaj has worked with trellis frames now for a while now. So the trellis actually cradles the tank and forms part of the protective and the fundamental structure of the machine, and is very clever. Yeah. So if you think about the motorcycle and divide it in half, the bottom half is where the engine space is, and the upper half is where the fuel and the airbox go.
It's a new engine as well. It's a sloper.
Brand new engine. Yeah. It's not just a sloper, it's brand new. And it is a sloper because that's the only space they had. Right above that engine head are the injectors, right above which is the tank. In fact, the airbox and the petrol tank wrap around the CNG tank. So if you sit on the motorcycle, the right side is the fuel tank, the left side is the airbox. And if you look under the motorcycle, it's a mess.
Yeah.
That's also why it has a 16-inch rear wheel. That's also why it has a linked rear monoshock.
What's the 16-inch rear wheel connection?
Basically, the CNG tank takes up so much space that when you create a reasonable ground clearance, you also push the seat height up to 825. But the CNG tank also heats up, so it can't be packaged too tightly. You have to allow it a little bit of room. So if you look at the back of the bike, in front of the monoshock, the fender rises quite steeply. If you put a bigger wheel in there, it will touch those things.
Okay.
So it can't be bigger than 16.
Okay.
Which also means that if you buy a Freedom, replacing the rear tire, you'll probably end up at Bajaj, and at the dealership ordering a tire, you may not be able to find a 16-inch tire too easily unless it becomes super popular, in which case then everybody will have a 16-inch rear tire. Because there is no space there, you also cannot have a direct monoshock, which is much cheaper to make. This is why you need the link, because you also need travel. It's a heavy motorcycle. Okay, this is the problem that the 390 Adventure, for example, has. It's a heavy motorcycle, but it's a tall motorcycle, so you have limited travel, so the suspension becomes super stiff and then you hate it. This is what they solved with the link. So the link allows them to have, if I'm not mistaken, I'll put the numbers, 120 mm of rear wheel travel and 125 of front wheel travel. This is still a budget motorcycle. It's not going to feel awesome, but it is competent enough. But it is tuned for more people riding 2-up more of the time, because Bajaj says that's how this segment seems to work. People rarely ride 1-up. You'll always have 2-up. And the suspension calculation is for 2-up. So when I rode the bike 1-up, it didn't feel super comfortable. It felt competent. So you will feel the road. It will bounce you around here and there. On bad roads, you will bounce around and you will run out of suspension ability here and there. But if you put 2-up, I think...
So what kind of scenarios? Like going over speed breakers and stuff?
No, it's like broken roads. Like, for example, post-elections, all the roads in Maharashtra are basically broken up right now. Okay, so today is not even smooth tarmac anymore. It's broken tarmac. It's gravel from that tarmac breaking up. It's paver tiles. It's potholes. All of that you will feel.
Okay.
Will you feel it to the point of saying, "Oh my God, this is terrible"? I can't. No, it's not that bad. It's not harsh.
Okay.
But if you were 2-up, I think the shocks would come to you less, which is what it's been calculated for.
Okay. So it's on the firmer side that way?
Oh, for sure. It is on the firmer side. And because of the packaging, the seat is also tall. It's 825. And honestly, the first time I climbed down on it, I banged my knee onto the seat. Because I hadn't expected how high I'll have to raise my foot. It didn't happen again. After that, I got used to it. Once you sit down, also, it doesn't compress too much. Because obviously, for the same reason, then you'll start running out of clearance again.
And does it feel wide?
No.
It doesn't feel
It
wide?
feels very calculated. So you're not expecting a super wide experience anyway, and it's not. But is it super skinny? No, it's not. It's a reasonable
I wouldn't have
size.
expected it to be skinny for sure. I would have thought it would have felt wide because of the tank in the middle and the frame.
No, the packaging is pretty clear on that, right? Okay. So in between your legs, effectively, there's the tank width, and immediately next to it are the frame tubes. Immediately next to that is the bodywork. So they've not wasted any space there, which is why the tank opens like this. Where it opens is where all the saman is.
Okay.
If you really enjoyed this clip, there's not much that you can do because it's over, but this clip is from a much longer video which plays on our main channel, which is called MotorInc. I invite you now to visit there and explore this idea in more detail, and there you'll meet another amazing MotorInc personality, my great friend Karthikeya Singhi, the one and only.